I never thought I'd be the one telling this story, but sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of justice. My name is Arya, and I watched my brother destroy the best thing that ever happened to him. What he didn't know was that his ex-wife would rise from those ashes like a phoenix, and when she did, the entire city of Denver would witness his downfall. It started 7 years ago when my brother Blake married Sophia. Blake was everything you'd expect from a successful tech entrepreneur in his early 30s, arrogant, flashy, and completely obsessed with image. His company, Sterling Innovations, had just gone public, and suddenly he was Denver's golden boy. Designer suits, luxury cars, penthouse apartment overlooking the Rockies. He walked around like he owned the world. Sophia was different. She had this quiet elegance that didn't need diamonds or designer labels. Auburn hair that caught sunlight like silk, green eyes that held warmth instead of calculation. She loved Blake genuinely, not for his bank account or social status. I could see it in how she looked at him, how she supported his dreams even when his ego grew too big for any room. But Blake wanted more than love. He wanted a legacy. He wanted sons to carry the Sterling name. And as the months turned to years without pregnancy, his impatience grew into something uglier. I remember the night everything exploded. I was at their mansion in Cherry Hills Village for dinner when Blake's voice started rising from their bedroom. The staff pretended not to hear, but the walls couldn't contain his rage. 7 years, Sophia. 7 goddamn years and still nothing. Do you want me to die without an heir? Her voice was barely a whisper. Blake, we've tried everything. Maybe we should see another specialist in Chicago or New York. There might be new treatments. Treatments. His laugh was harsh, bitter. I'm tired of treatments. I'm tired of hope. My mother calls every week asking when you'll give me a son. My business partners whisper behind my back. Do you know what it's like being mocked as a man who can't even get his wife pregnant? Please don't talk like that. I'm your wife. We promised each other. Promises don't make babies. What good is a wife who can't bear children? You eat my food, wear my clothes, live in my house, and you can't give me one son to carry my name. You're a curse, Sophia. A beautiful, useless curse. The sound of her crying reached me in the hallway. My heart broke for her, but I was a coward. I should have stormed in there. I should have defended her. Instead, I sat frozen as my brother's cruelty tore apart the woman who'd become like a sister to me. Tomorrow, I'm calling my lawyer. This marriage is finished. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came her voice, broken but still trying. Blake, look at me. Look at the woman who stood by you when your company almost failed. Who held you when your father died. Who believed in you before anyone else did. Don't throw me away like garbage. But Blake's heart had turned to stone. Pack your things. By morning, I don't want to see you here. I watched from my window as Sophia left that night, carrying nothing but a small suitcase and 7 years of shattered dreams. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't know I was crying too. She just walked into the darkness, her shoulders straight despite the weight of her heartbreak. Blake got his divorce papers filed within a week. The media called it amicable, but I knew better. He'd branded her as defective, useless, and cast her out like she was nothing. The woman who'd loved him unconditionally was now just another casualty of his relentless ambition. What Blake didn't know was that Sophia's story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. 3 months after the divorce, I lost touch with Sophia completely. She'd vanished from Denver's social scene, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. The whispers followed her everywhere. Poor thing, she must be devastated. I heard she was barren. Blake had no choice but to move on. The cruelty was suffocating. Blake, meanwhile, threw himself into the bachelor lifestyle with nauseating enthusiasm. New cars, expensive watches, and a rotating door of women who saw dollar signs instead of flaws. But I noticed something he didn't want anyone else to see. the emptiness behind his eyes. Success without love is just expensive loneliness. I tried calling Sophia once, but her number was disconnected. I drove by her old apartment, but the landlord said she'd moved out without leaving a forwarding address. It was like she'd simply disappeared. Then, 6 months later, I ran into her best friend Carmen at a coffee shop in Lodo. Carmen had always been protective of Sophia, and she looked at me with undisguised hostility. "If you're here to fish for information for your brother, you can forget it," she said coldly. "I'm not. I genuinely care about Sophia. Is she okay?" Carmen studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "She's surviving. Barely. Your brother destroyed her, Arya. She spent weeks crying herself to sleep, convinced she was broken, worthless. But she's fighting back now." "Where is she?" "Starting over. She opened a small catering business called Garden Fresh. Nothing fancy, just honest food made with love. She's working 18-hour days, but she's healing." Relief flooded through me. "Can I see her?" Carmen shook her head. "She's not ready. Maybe someday, but not now. She needs to rebuild herself first." I respected that, but it hurt. Sophia had been family to me, and Blake's selfishness had cost me that relationship too. Meanwhile, Blake was making headlines again. Sterling Innovations had landed a massive government contract, and he was riding high on success. But success couldn't fill the void where his conscience should have been. He started seeing a therapist, though he'd never admit it publicly. His assistant let it slip during a family dinner. Therapy. Our mother, Patricia, looked scandalized. What does he need therapy for? He's rich, successful, and finally free to find a proper wife. I wanted to scream. Maybe because he destroyed the best thing in his life and he knows it. The silence around the table was deafening. Patricia's disapproval was palpable, but I didn't care anymore. Blake had made his choice, and now he was living with the consequences. But the real shock came a year later when Carmen called me, her voice trembling with excitement. "Arya, you need to sit down for this." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Sophia went to see a fertility specialist in California last month. She ran every test imaginable. My heart stopped. And she's completely fine. Perfectly healthy. No fertility issues whatsoever. The doctor said she could have gotten pregnant easily with the right partner. The phone slipped from my hand. I stared at the wall, processing what this meant. Blake had blamed Sophia for 7 years. He'd called her barren, worthless, a curse. He divorced her and destroyed her reputation based on absolutely nothing. Carmen, does she know this changes everything? She could. She could what? Go back to the man who called her garbage? The man who threw her out like trash? Carmen's voice was fierce. No. She's done with him. But she's not done with life. Something in her tone made me suspicious. What aren't you telling me? Carmen was quiet for a moment. She's dating someone. A good man this time. Kind, gentle, everything your brother isn't. His name is David, and he owns a successful construction company. He treats her like she hung the moon. The irony was almost too much to bear. While Blake was drowning his emptiness in material things, Sophia was finding real love with someone who valued her for who she was, not what she could give him. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no, this was just the beginning of Blake's reckoning. Blake's bachelor paradise lasted exactly 2 years before his loneliness became unbearable. He needed someone new, someone who could give him the air he desperately craved. His choice shocked even me. Her name was Victoria Kane, a 26-year-old fashion influencer from Miami with platinum blonde hair, surgically enhanced everything, and a social media following that made Blake salivate. She was beautiful in that artificial, Instagram-perfect way that photographed well but felt cold to the touch. Blake met her at a tech conference in South Beach, and within 3 months, she'd moved to Denver. Victoria wasn't subtle about her intentions. She wanted the sterling fortune, and Blake wanted a trophy wife who could produce beautiful babies. It was a transaction disguised as romance. "She's perfect," Blake told me over dinner at the Brown Palace, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Young, healthy, ambitious. And she wants children as much as I do." I studied Victoria as she posed for selfies with her champagne glass. Everything about her screamed calculated perfection. "Have you talked about family planning?" "Actually discussed it." Blake waved dismissively. "She's young and healthy." Not like, he stopped himself, but I knew what he was going to say. "Not like Sophia." The engagement happened fast. Blake proposed at a Broncos game, on the Jumbotron, with 50,000 people watching. Victoria said yes with tears streaming down her perfectly contoured cheeks, but I noticed how quickly she checked her phone afterward to see how many likes the video was getting. The wedding planning consumed the next 8 months. No expense was spared. Venue, the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs. Dress, custom Vera Wang. Flowers, flown in from Holland. Guest list, 500 of Denver's elite. It was going to be the social event of the year. But Blake had one more surprise planned, and this one made my blood run cold. "I'm inviting Sophia," he announced during a family dinner. Patricia nearly choked on her wine. "Your ex-wife? Why on earth would you do that?" Blake's smile was cruel. "I want her to see what she lost. I want her to sit there and watch me marry a woman who can actually give me children. Front row seat to her replacement." I felt sick. "Blake, that's unnecessarily cruel. Sophia never hurt you." "She wasted 7 years of my life." "No, you wasted 7 years of hers by never getting tested yourself." The words hung in the air like a slap. Blake's face darkened dangerously. "What's that supposed to mean?" I shouldn't have said it, but I was tired of watching him destroy people. "It means maybe the problem was never with her. Maybe you should have looked in the mirror instead of pointing fingers." Blake stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "How dare you? After everything I've accomplished, everything I've built, you take her side." "I take the side of basic human decency." He stormed out, but not before I saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. Because deep down, Blake knew I might be right. He'd never gotten tested. He'd never considered that he might be the one with fertility issues. His ego couldn't handle that possibility. But he was committed to his revenge fantasy now. The invitation went out 2 weeks later, hand-delivered to whatever address he could find for Sophia. First-class postage, gold embossing, her name printed in elegant script on the guest list. Front row, center seat, where she couldn't be missed. Victoria thought it was iconic, and posted about it on her Instagram stories. When you're so confident in your glow-up that you invite the ex to witness your happiness. #blessed, #new wife, #upgrade. I wanted to warn Sophia somehow, but I didn't know how to reach her. All I could do was watch this train wreck unfold and pray that somehow, she'd find the strength to survive whatever humiliation Blake had planned. What I didn't know was that Sophia was no longer the broken woman who'd left his house 3 years ago. She'd been transformed by love, by truth, and by a miracle that would soon shock everyone who thought they knew her story. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and Blake had no idea he was about to face the reckoning of his lifetime. 2 weeks before Blake's wedding, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't stand by and watch my brother humiliate Sophia without at least trying to warn her. Through some detective work and a private investigator, I finally tracked down her address in Stapleton, a quiet neighborhood where she'd been rebuilding her life away from Denver's socialite scene. Garden Fresh Catering had grown into something beautiful. Sophia's small storefront buzzed with activity, filled with the aromas of fresh herbs and homemade bread. When I walked through those doors, I barely recognized the woman behind the counter. Gone was the fragile, defeated person who'd left Blake's mansion. This Sophia radiated quiet confidence. Her auburn hair was shorter, framing her face in soft waves. She wore a simple green dress that brought out her eyes, and when she smiled at customers, it reached all the way to her soul. She'd found herself again. Arya. Her voice held surprise, not hostility. What are you doing here? I came to warn you, I said, approaching the counter carefully. Blake sent you a wedding invitation, didn't he? Her expression didn't change, but I saw her hands still for just a moment. Yes. 3 days ago. You're not actually considering going, are you? He's trying to humiliate you, Sophia. He wants you to sit there and watch him marry Victoria, to rub your face in what you lost. To my surprise, she smiled. I know exactly what he's trying to do. Then why haven't you thrown the invitation away? Before she could answer, a man emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of fresh croissants. Tall, broad-shouldered, with gentle brown eyes and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. This had to be David, the man Carmen had mentioned. Honey, is everything all right? His voice carried genuine concern as he set protective eyes on me. David, this is Arya, Blake's sister. Arya, this is my husband, David Martinez. Husband. The word hit me like a lightning bolt. You're married. Sophia's smile widened, and she held up her left hand. A simple white gold band caught the light, elegant in its understated beauty. 6 months ago. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. David wrapped his arm around her waist, and I could see the love between them immediately. It was nothing like the possessive way Blake used to claim her. This was gentle, secure, real. Congratulations, I said, meaning it completely. I'm so happy for you. Thank you. David makes me feel like the luckiest woman alive. David chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. I'm the lucky one. Your brother was an idiot to let her go. The casual way he dismissed Blake made me like him instantly. But something still nagged at me. Sophia, if you're happy, if you've moved on, why haven't you declined the wedding invitation? She exchanged a look with David, and he nodded encouragingly. Because, she said softly, I think it's time Blake learned the truth. What truth? Come in the back. There's something I need to show you. David led me through the kitchen to a small office behind the storefront. The walls were covered with business certificates, photos, and 3 sonogram images in matching frames. My heart stopped. Sophia. She nodded, her hand moving instinctively to her stomach. I'm 18 weeks pregnant. With triplets. The world tilted on its axis. Triplets. 2 boys and a girl, David said proudly. Due in December. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Does Blake know? Nobody knows except you, Carmen, and David's family. We've been very careful to keep it quiet. But the wedding, if you show up pregnant. I won't be showing much at 18 weeks, especially with loose clothing. But that's not why I'm going. Her voice grew stronger. I'm going because for 3 years, I believed I was broken. I hated myself, blamed myself, thought I was less than a woman because of what Blake said. But I'm not broken, Arya. I never was. The pieces clicked into place. The fertility tests came back perfect. The doctor said my reproductive system is completely healthy. The only reason I didn't get pregnant with Blake was because... She paused, letting me reach the conclusion myself. Because the problem was never with you. Blake never got tested. Not once in 7 years. He just assumed, blamed, and destroyed our marriage based on his own insecurity and pride. David's jaw tightened. What he did to her was unforgivable. But Sophia has forgiven him, which makes her a better person than I am. I looked at this woman who'd been through hell and come out stronger. So you're going to the wedding to prove what, exactly? Sophia's eyes held a quiet fire. I'm not going to prove anything. I'm going to let the truth speak for itself. When Blake sees me happy, healthy, and clearly capable of having children, he'll know. And everyone else will know too. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. She wouldn't have to say a word, wouldn't have to cause a scene. Her mere presence, visibly pregnant and glowing with happiness, would expose Blake's lies for what they were. What if he tries to cause trouble? I asked. David's expression hardened. Then he'll deal with me. I left the shop that day with a new respect for Sophia and a growing dread for what was about to happen at Blake's wedding. My brother had no idea he'd invited his own reckoning. But the real surprise was yet to come. Because Sophia's plan was even more elaborate than I knew, and Blake's humiliation was going to be more complete than anyone could imagine. The night before Blake's wedding, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment in Capitol Hill, knowing that tomorrow would change everything. Sophia's plan was elegant in its simplicity, but I wondered if she truly understood the nuclear bomb she was about to detonate. Blake, meanwhile, was living his best life. The bachelor party had been epic. Private jet to Las Vegas, penthouse suite, every luxury money could buy. His social media was flooded with photos of him living like a king, surrounded by friends who envied his success and his beautiful bride-to-be. Victoria had spent the week at a luxury spa in Aspen, posting Instagram stories about her wedding prep. Facials, massages, yoga sessions, everything to ensure she looked flawless for what she was calling the wedding of the century. The rehearsal dinner at the Broadmoor was a spectacle of wealth and privilege. Blake had flown in his favorite chef from New York. The flowers alone cost more than most people's cars, and the champagne flowed like water. I watched him hold court, telling stories about his business conquests, his arm possessively around Victoria's waist. Tomorrow, he announced to the gathered crowd, I marry not just the woman of my dreams, but the future mother of my children. The sterling legacy continues. The applause was thunderous. Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, finally getting the daughter-in-law she'd always wanted. Blake's business partners toasted to future generations of sterling success. But I noticed something others missed, the shadow that crossed Blake's face when he thought no one was looking. Deep down, he knew something was wrong. 3 years of marriage to Sophia with no pregnancy, and now 2 years with Victoria trying to conceive, also with no results. His confidence was a carefully constructed facade. Victoria, for her part, had been privately panicking. She'd confided to her maid of honor that despite months of trying, she wasn't pregnant yet. The pressure was eating at her, but she maintained her perfect smile for the cameras. After the dinner, I cornered Blake on the hotel balcony overlooking the mountains. Big day tomorrow, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. The biggest. Everything I've worked for, everything I've built, it all comes together tomorrow. He lit a cigar, looking every inch the successful businessman. You know what the best part is? I dreaded the answer. What's that? Sophia will be there to see it all. Front row seat to watch me marry a woman who can actually give me what I need. My stomach churned. Blake, what if? What if what? His tone sharpened. Don't tell me you're still defending her. I'm just saying, maybe you should consider that there might be more to the story than you know. Blake laughed harshly. 7 years, Arya. 7 years of disappointment. That's all the story I need. I wanted to tell him about Sophia's pregnancy, about the triplets, about the fertility tests that proved she was never the problem. But it wasn't my truth to tell. All I could do was watch my brother walk blindly toward his own destruction. Just promise me something, I said finally. What? Tomorrow, when everything happens, remember that actions have consequences. The way you treated Sophia, the things you said about her, it all matters. Blake's expression darkened. She got what she deserved. And tomorrow, she'll see what she lost. I left him there, smoking his cigar under the Colorado stars, completely unaware that his ex-wife was 3 hours away, preparing to show him exactly what he'd lost, and what he'd never deserved in the first place. Back in Denver, Sophia and David were having a quiet evening at home. She'd spent the day resting, her hands often drifting to her growing belly, where 3 little miracles were developing. David had insisted she put her feet up, bringing her tea and rubbing her shoulders. "Are you sure about tomorrow?" he asked for the 100th time. "We don't have to do this. You don't owe him anything." Sophia looked up at him with calm determination. "I don't owe him anything. But I owe myself the truth. For 3 years, I believed his lies about me. Tomorrow those lies die." She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a flowing navy dress that would hint at but not obviously reveal her pregnancy, paired with a tailored blazer and elegant jewelry David had given her for their wedding. She would look successful, confident, and undeniably beautiful. But the real showstopper would arrive at 2 p.m., just as the wedding ceremony was scheduled to begin. Carmen had helped coordinate every detail, ensuring that Sophia's entrance would be impossible to ignore and even harder to forget. As the sun set over the Rockies, 2 very different people prepared for sleep. Blake dreamed of triumph and vindication, while Sophia rested peacefully, knowing that tomorrow justice would finally be served. Neither of them could have imagined how completely the next day would change everything. The wedding day dawned crisp and clear, with the Colorado mountains providing a stunning backdrop for what was supposed to be Blake's moment of ultimate triumph. The Broadmoor was transformed into a fairy tale setting, white roses and silver accents everywhere, crystal chandeliers sparkling in the afternoon sun, and enough luxury to make even the wealthy guests whisper in admiration. I arrived early, my stomach in knots. The guest list read like a who's who of Denver society: politicians, business moguls, socialites, and media personalities. Everyone wanted to witness Blake Sterling's latest conquest. The photographers were already positioned, ready to capture every moment of what Blake had promised would be the event of the season. Victoria looked stunning in her custom Vera Wang gown, a creation of silk and crystals that probably cost more than most people's yearly salary. Her platinum hair was swept into an elaborate updo, and her makeup was flawless. She was the picture of bridal perfection, but I could see the tension around her eyes. The pressure of living up to Blake's expectations was wearing on her. Blake stood at the altar in his designer tuxedo, looking every inch the successful groom. He kept checking his watch and scanning the crowd, clearly looking for someone. His best man, Trevor, whispered something that made Blake smile coldly. "Is she here yet?" I heard Trevor ask. "She'll be here," Blake replied confidently. "She wouldn't miss this for the world." The guests began taking their seats. I noticed the empty chair in the front row, marked with a small card, reserved for Sofia Martinez. The name change was a detail Blake had missed, another sign of how completely he'd written her out of his life. As 2 p.m. approached, the ceremony music began. Victoria's bridesmaids walked down the aisle in perfectly choreographed procession, followed by the flower girl and ring bearer. The crowd rose as the bridal march started, all eyes on the doors where Victoria would make her grand entrance. But then I heard something that made my blood freeze, the low rumble of a powerful engine outside. Through the tall windows, I could see guests turning their heads, distracted by the sound of what could only be an expensive car pulling up to the entrance. Blake heard it too. His confident smile faltered slightly as murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't part of his carefully orchestrated plan. The wedding coordinator looked flustered, whispering urgently into her headset. Victoria, waiting in the vestibule, grew impatient. "What's the delay?" she snapped. But Blake's attention was fixed on the main doors. They opened slowly, and a figure stepped into the entrance of the ceremony hall. Sophia. But this wasn't the broken woman who had left his house 3 years ago. This Sophia was radiant, confident, and undeniably pregnant. The navy dress she wore was elegant and flowing, perfectly highlighting her glowing skin and the unmistakable curve of her belly. Her auburn hair caught the light streaming through the windows, and her green eyes held a peaceful strength that commanded attention. The whispers started immediately, like wildfire spreading through dry grass. Is that Sofia Martinez? She's pregnant. How far along is she? Who's the father? Blake's face went white, then red, then white again. His hands gripped the altar rail so tightly his knuckles showed bone white against his tan. But Sofia wasn't alone. Walking beside her, his hand protectively on her back, was David. He wore a simple black suit that couldn't hide his powerful build or the quiet confidence that radiated from every step. Behind them came Carmen, elegant in emerald green, and two other women I didn't recognize, clearly Sofia's chosen family. They moved down the aisle with unhurried grace, Sofia's hand resting on her belly, David's eyes watchful and protective. Every step was a statement, every breath a declaration that she had not just survived Blake's cruelty, she had thrived. Victoria finally appeared in the doorway, her perfect entrance completely upstaged. The photographer, confused by the divided attention of the crowd, didn't know where to point his camera. The wedding coordinator looked ready to faint. Sofia reached her reserved seat in the front row and sat down with serene composure. David took the seat beside her, his presence a clear message that she was no longer alone and vulnerable. Carmen and the other women filled in around them, creating a supportive circle that spoke of genuine friendship and love. The silence in the room was deafening. 500 guests sat frozen, witnessing a moment that would be talked about for years. Blake stood at the altar, his dream wedding turning into a nightmare before his eyes. Because everyone could see what he couldn't deny, Sofia wasn't just pregnant. She was glowing with the unmistakable radiance of a woman carrying life. The very thing Blake had blamed her for being unable to do, she was doing beautifully. And if she could do it now, with another man, then the problem had never been with her at all. Trevor cleared his throat. Blake? The ceremony. But Blake couldn't move, couldn't speak. He was staring at Sofia like he'd seen a ghost, and in a way he had. The ghost of his own lies, his own failures, his own devastating pride. Victoria finally reached the altar, her perfect smile cracking around the edges. Blake? She whispered. Blake, what's wrong? The question hung in the air like a sword about to fall. Because what was wrong was everything Blake had built his new life on: lies, blame, and the destruction of an innocent woman who had loved him unconditionally. And now the truth was sitting in the front row, beautiful and pregnant and impossible to ignore. The wedding ceremony that was supposed to showcase Blake's triumph became the stage for his complete humiliation. Victoria stood beside him at the altar, her perfect smile wavering as she tried to understand why her groom had turned into a statue. Pastor Williams, seemingly unaware of the drama unfolding, began the ceremony with traditional words about love, commitment, and faithfulness. The irony was lost on no one except perhaps Blake, who stood frozen, his eyes locked on Sofia. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Blake Sterling and Victoria Kane in holy matrimony. But the congregation wasn't listening to the pastor. Every eye was on the pregnant woman in the front row, the whispers growing louder with each passing second. She looks about 5 months along. Remember when Blake said she was barren? If she can get pregnant now. Sofia sat with perfect composure, her hands folded over her belly, occasionally whispering something to David that made him smile softly. She looked like a woman at peace with herself and her life, everything Blake had tried to destroy but failed to break. Patricia Sterling, Blake's mother, sat in the second row looking like she'd seen a ghost. She'd been one of Sofia's harshest critics during the marriage, constantly pressuring her about grandchildren and eventually supporting Blake's decision to divorce. Now the woman she'd helped destroy was carrying what looked like the child Patricia had always demanded. Blake. Victoria's voice cut through the murmurs, sharp with growing panic. The pastor asked you a question. Blake blinked, finally tearing his gaze away from Sofia. What? Pastor Williams looked concerned. Do you take Victoria to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse? The words hung in the air. Blake's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Because standing there, looking at the woman he destroyed for not giving him children, then at Victoria who also hadn't conceived despite months of trying, the truth was finally dawning on him. The problem had never been with them. It had been with him all along. Blake stammered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. That's when Sophia stood up. The movement was graceful, unhurried, and it commanded the attention of every person in the room. David immediately stood beside her, his hand on her back, ready to support her or defend her as needed. "Excuse me," Sophia said, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think there's something everyone should know." Victoria's face went pale. "What are you doing? This is my wedding." Sophia's smile was kind but unwavering. "I know, and I'm truly sorry for the disruption. But Blake invited me here for a reason, and I think it's time that reason was made clear." Blake found his voice. "Sophia, don't." "Don't what?" "Don't tell the truth." She placed both hands on her belly, the gesture unmistakable and powerful. "For 3 years, I lived believing I was broken because you told me I was. You called me barren, cursed, useless. You convinced me that my inability to give you children made me less than a woman." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "But 6 months ago, I went to a fertility specialist in California, Dr. Rebecca Morrison at the Stanford Fertility Center. I ran every test imaginable because I needed to know the truth about myself." Blake's face was ashen. "Sophia, please stop. The tests showed that my reproductive system is completely healthy. Perfect, actually. Dr. Morrison said I should have no trouble conceiving with the right partner." She looked directly at Blake. "Which meant the problem was never with me." A gasp went through the crowd. Patricia Sterling looked like she might faint. Sophia continued, her voice steady and clear. 3 months later, I conceived triplets with my husband David. 2 boys and a girl, due in December. The very thing you said I could never do, I'm doing now, easily, naturally, joyfully." The silence was deafening. Every guest was processing the implications. If Sophia could get pregnant now, and easily, then Blake's entire narrative about their marriage was a lie. He had destroyed a good woman based on his own failings, his own refusal to consider that he might be the one with the problem. Victoria turned on Blake, her voice rising. "You told me she was barren. You said that's why you divorced her. You said." "I thought she was," Blake whispered, but his words carried no conviction. "You never got tested, did you?" Sophia's voice was gentle but implacable. "In 7 years of marriage, you never once considered that the problem might be with you. You just blamed me, destroyed my self-worth, and threw me away like trash." Trevor, trying to salvage the situation, stepped forward. "Look, maybe we should take this conversation somewhere private." "No." Sophia's voice was firm. "Blake brought me here to humiliate me in front of all these people. He wanted me to sit in the front row and watch him marry someone who could give him what I supposedly couldn't. Well, here I am. But the humiliation isn't mine anymore." Blake tried one last desperate play. Even if you're right about the medical situation, that doesn't change anything. I've moved on. I'm marrying Victoria." Victoria laughed bitterly. "Are you insane? You think I'm going to marry you after this? After finding out you lied about everything? That you destroyed your first wife based on your own inadequacy?" She ripped off her engagement ring and threw it at Blake's feet. The 3-carat diamond made a sharp pinging sound as it hit the marble floor of the altar. "You told me she couldn't have children. You made me believe I was special, that I was the solution to your problems. But the problem is you, Blake. It's always been you." The crowd was in chaos now. Phones were out, recording every moment. This would be all over social media within the hour. Blake Sterling, Denver's golden boy, exposed as a fraud in front of 500 of the city's most influential people. Blake made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Everyone needs to calm down. This is just. Just what? Sophia's voice cut through his panic like a blade. Just the truth? Just justice for 3 years of believing I was worthless because of your lies. She stepped closer to the altar, David beside her, her pregnancy radiant and undeniable. You want to know what's truly tragic, Blake? If you had just been honest, if you had gotten tested, if you had faced your own limitations instead of destroying me, we might have found solutions. Fertility treatments, adoption, surrogacy. There were so many paths we could have taken together. Blake's legs seemed to give out. He sank into the chair that had been placed beside the altar for elderly guests, his head in his hands. But instead, Sophia continued, her voice never rising but carrying to every corner of the silent room, you chose pride over truth. Ego over love. You chose to break me rather than face the possibility that you might be broken. Patricia Sterling finally found her voice. Sophia dear, surely we can work this out privately. Privately. Sophia turned to face Blake's mother, the woman who had spent years pressuring her about grandchildren. The way you privately supported Blake when he called me cursed? The way you privately agreed when he said I was a burden on your family? Patricia's face crumpled. She had been complicit in Sophia's destruction, and now the whole room knew it. Victoria was gathering her dress, preparing to leave. This wedding is over. Blake, don't ever contact me again. And when the fertility problems start with your next victim, maybe suggest she get tested first before you destroy her life too. She swept out of the room, her bridesmaids scrambling after her, leaving Blake alone at the altar that was supposed to be his moment of triumph. Trevor, loyal to the end, tried to salvage something from the wreckage. Everyone, let's just take a moment to. No. Blake's voice was broken, defeated. He stood slowly, looking older than his 35 years. It's over. Everything's over. He looked at Sophia one last time, and I saw something I'd never seen in my brother's eyes before, genuine remorse. Sophia, he said quietly, but his voice carried in the silent room. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You deserved better than me. For the first time, Sophia's composure softened. Yes, I did deserve better. But I found it. She looked at David with such love that it made my chest tight. I found a man who values me for who I am, not what I can give him. Who supports me instead of tearing me down. Who chose to build me up rather than break me. David's arm tightened around her protectively, and he spoke for the first time. Blake, my wife is twice the person you'll ever be. What you did to her was unforgivable. But she's forgiven you anyway, because that's who she is. Don't you dare waste that gift. The truth was laid bare now. Blake Sterling, the man who had everything, had thrown away the only thing that truly mattered, genuine love from a good woman. And in trying to humiliate her, he had only succeeded in exposing his own failures to everyone who mattered in his world. As the guests began to file out, the whispers following them, I knew this was the beginning of Blake's reckoning. The business deals would dry up. The social invitations would stop coming. The respect he had commanded through wealth and success would evaporate in the face of this public revelation of his character. But for Sophia, walking out of that chapel with her head high, her husband beside her, and 3 miracles growing inside her, this was vindication complete. She had faced her destroyer and emerged victorious, not through cruelty or revenge, but through the simple devastating power of truth. The wedding that was supposed to humiliate her had instead freed her from the last chains of Blake's lies. And as she stepped into the Colorado sunshine, radiant with pregnancy and genuine happiness, she was finally completely free. 6 months later, I stood in the nursery of Sophia and David's new home in Cherry Creek, watching my brother's ex-wife gently rock 3 sleeping babies. The Martinez triplets, little David Jr., Sophia Grace, and Emma Rose, had arrived healthy and perfect just before Christmas, completing Sophia's transformation from broken victim to radiant mother. The fallout from Blake's wedding disaster had been swift and merciless. Videos of the confrontation went viral within hours, trending on every social platform with hashtags like #exposedgroom and #karmawedding. Blake's business suffered massive hits as partners distanced themselves from the scandal. Sterling Innovations lost 3 major contracts, and Blake was forced to step down as CEO. But the professional consequences were nothing compared to the personal reckoning. Blake finally went to see a fertility specialist, and the results confirmed what everyone already knew: severe fertility issues that could have been treated years ago with proper medical intervention. "The irony is devastating," I told Sophia as she placed little David Jr. back in his crib. "If he had just swallowed his pride and gotten tested when you first suggested it." Sophia adjusted the baby's blanket with the practiced ease of a new mother who'd found her calling. "We might have had children together. But honestly, Arya, I can't imagine my life any other way now. These babies, this marriage, this happiness, it all came from surviving Blake's worst." David appeared in the doorway carrying a tray with hot chocolate for all of us. He'd taken paternity leave from his construction company to help with the triplets, and watching him with his children was like seeing love in action. He was everything Blake had never been: present, supportive, genuinely invested in his family's well-being. "How is he doing?" David asked, settling into the rocking chair beside Sophia. "Blake, I mean." I sighed, thinking of my last visit with my brother. "He's in therapy now. Real therapy, not just image management. He's trying to understand how his ego destroyed everything good in his life." Blake had hit rock bottom hard. The public humiliation, the business losses, the realization that his own untreated medical condition had cost him his marriage, it all came crashing down at once. He'd spent weeks in a dark depression before finally accepting that he needed professional help. "Has he tried to contact you?" I asked Sophia. She shook her head. David made it very clear that wouldn't be welcome. But Blake did send a letter through his therapist. "What did it say?" "That he was getting the medical treatment he should have gotten years ago. That he's trying to understand why he needed to blame me instead of facing his own limitations. And that he hopes someday his children, if the treatments work, will be better people than he was." It was progress, I supposed. Blake was finally confronting the pride and fear that had made him so destructive. "I've been thinking about forgiveness," Sophia continued, gently bouncing little Sophia as she stirred. "Not for Blake's sake, but for mine. Carrying anger about what he did to me only hurts me and my family now." David reached over to squeeze her hand. "You're the strongest person I know." Watching them together, I marveled at how completely Sophia had rebuilt her life. Her catering business had exploded after the wedding incident. Everyone in Denver wanted to hire the woman who'd stood up to Blake Sterling. She'd moved into a larger space, hired additional staff, and was already planning a second location. But more than professional success, she'd found genuine happiness. The woman Blake had called barren was now the mother of 3 beautiful children. The woman he'd said was worthless was now treasured by a man who saw her true value. The woman he'd tried to humiliate had become the most respected person in the room. "There's something else," Sophia said, looking slightly nervous. "David and I have been talking, and we'd like you to be the godmother to one of the babies. If you want to." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Even after everything Blake did? Everything our family put you through?" "You're not Blake," David said firmly. "You tried to warn Sophia about the wedding. You've always treated her with respect. Family isn't just blood, it's who chooses to love and support you." I looked down at little Emma Rose, sleeping peacefully in her crib, completely unaware of the complicated history that had led to her existence. "I would be honored." As I prepared to leave that evening, Sophia walked me to the door. "Arya, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think Blake will ever really change? Or is this just another performance?" I considered the question carefully. I'd seen Blake at his worst and his most vulnerable. I think he's trying. The therapy seems genuine. But changing the kind of pride that nearly destroyed him? That's going to be a lifetime of work. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. I hope he succeeds. Not for my sake, my life is perfect now. But maybe so he doesn't hurt anyone else the way he hurt me. Driving home through the snowy Denver streets, I reflected on the journey that had brought us all to this point. Blake's attempt to humiliate his ex-wife had backfired spectacularly, exposing his own failures and lies to the world. But from the ashes of that destruction, Sophia had built something beautiful, a loving marriage, healthy children, professional success, and most importantly, peace with herself. The story could have ended with Blake's public humiliation. But the real victory wasn't in his downfall, it was in Sophia's rise. She had taken everything he tried to destroy about her and transformed it into strength. She'd found love with someone who valued her completely. She'd become the mother he'd convinced her she could never be. In the end, Blake's cruelty had freed her to find the life she was truly meant to live. And watching her rock her 3 babies to sleep, surrounded by genuine love and contentment, I knew that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. The woman Blake Sterling had called worthless was now worth everything. And the empire he'd built on pride and lies was crumbling while her kingdom of love and truth flourished. Justice, it turned out, was a patient architect, and Sophia Martinez was its masterpiece.